Chapter 9. The classroom seemed stuffier than ever that afternoon, and following the morning's tunnel exercise, the entire class had trouble staying awake. Not that Mr. Spicer seemed to notice. He just handed out the test papers and sat in his swivel chair, feet up on his desk, idly playing with the gold hoop in his ear. "No talking," he said lazily, and began humming a tune from the new production of the Cycling Fish entitled Daisy's Lament. Fergus looked at the test paper. How might one traverse a lateral tunnel, and how many easy steps might this take? Please number them clearly in your answer. Fergus looked round at the rest of the class. Sylvie was writing furiously, already on her second sheet of paper. Horace was looking out of the window, smiling to himself. Spike and Mouse were both sucking their pencils, deep in thought. Perhaps it was because none of them had been able to go to school before now that they all, except maybe Horace, took their studies seriously. Nobody wanted to let their parents down. Fergus sighed. The previous night he'd only got to the second step in the book before nodding off. Secure your crampon to the rock face and proceed to the lip of the transverse tunnel, he remembered. But then what? Fergus had absolutely no idea. Instead of studying his copy of Practical Potholing for Beginners, he'd spent the whole evening waiting for a flying box from someone claiming to be his long-lost Uncle Theo. What had it said again? Oh yes, you are in great danger. Danger of failing this test, Fergus muttered unhappily. I am sending help. I could do with some help right now, thought Fergus drowsily. His head began to nod, his eyes closed, and "Time's up," bellowed Mr. Spicer. "Class dismissed. Hand in your test papers on your way out." Fergus looked down at his paper. It was blank, except for a thumb mark and an ink blot resembling a fat rabbit. He handed it in anyway and hurried to the cloak cabin where the others were picking up their bags and saying their goodbyes. Fergus went to his hook and stopped in surprise. "Look at that," said Horace over his shoulder. "Fergus's lunchbox has climbed back into his backpack. How cool is that?" Calling his goodbyes, Fergus headed down the gangplank and was just about to head off along the canal side when Bolivia swooped down and fluttered, screeching, inches above his head. "Don't come to school tomorrow! Don't come to school tomorrow!" "News travels fast," said Fergus bitterly. "So you've heard about my test paper already. Don't worry, Bolivia," he waved the parrot away. "I promise I'll do better tomorrow." Chapter 10. What with the tunnel exercise and the previous night's lack of sleep, Fergus was exhausted. The walk home took him nearly twice as long as usual. He turned left at the statue of General Montmorency and trudged through the narrow alleys. Turning right, he pushed past a queue of schoolgirls from Harbour Heights clustered around old Mother Bleeny's bagel stand, giggling and gossiping excitedly, and walked slowly along Boulevard Archduke Ferdinand. "Afternoon, Fergus," Ned, the sandwich board man, called out. Fergus trudged past in a daze. Further along the road, he didn't seem to hear the mournful music of Antonio, the hurdy-gurdy man, and he completely ignored Pepe the monkey when it held out its tasselled fez to him. Past the familiar shops he went, head down. Madame Amy's wedding gowns, H. Luscombe's umbrellas, Le Café Rondel, Joshua Berwick, bespoke tailor. He didn't acknowledge a single nod or wave. Arriving at the front door of Archduke Ferdinand Apartments, Fergus fumbled for his keys and let himself in. As he reached the first landing, he could see Major and Mrs. Bigsby Clutterbuck waving their arms about and talking loudly, while Miss Jemima Gum stood beside them in a pair of worn-looking carpet slippers, weeping loudly and pointing at the carved lintel above her front door. Do get him down, Barty! Mrs. Bigsby Clutterbuck was shouting. No, not like that. You're frightening him. Doing my best, Maudie, bellowed the Major. If you could just quieten poor Miss Gum down, perhaps I could hear myself think. Horrid cat! Horrid cat! Miss Gum was wailing. Look, it's got a poor little blackbird in its mouth. Oh, she wailed even louder. I can't bear it. Fergus looked up. There, perched on the carved head of Archduke Ferdinand, which graced the impressive lintel above Miss Gum's front door, crouched Prince Caspian, the Bigsby Clutterbuck's Persian cat, something black clasped firmly in its mouth. Cassie, baby! Mrs. Bigsby Clutterbuck's voice was thick and honeyed. Come to Mummy, there's a good boy. You don't want to hurt the little birdie, do you? Poor little bird, wailed Miss Gum. Just then, two heads appeared over the stairwell above. Is everything all right down there? Called Madame Lavinia. I'm running a little late, but if I can be of any assistance, Dr. Fassbinder added, following her down the stairs. It's Prince Caspian. Major Bigsby Clutterbuck cleared his throat and assumed a military bearing. Been out on a recce, come back with a little something, ran up Miss Gum's front door frame, won't come down. Cats will be cats. Poor little bird, wailed Miss Gum for a second time. Quite a little show we've got down here, came a deep musical voice from the second floor. All eyes turned to the stairway. Hello, everybody. Eugenie Beecham was making her entrance. She was dressed in a shimmering fish-scale dress of iridescent green, topped off with a stunning coral tiara that sparkled with sequins. In one hand she carried a long trident, in the other a bicycle pump. She fluttered her long, beautiful eyelashes. For a moment there was complete silence in the chilly hallway. What's everyone staring at? Eugenie asked. Oh, this? She said, patting her shimmering dress and giving a little tinkling laugh. Ha ha ha! This is my costume. Costume? Said Dr. Fassbinder and Madame Lavinia at the same time. Yes, my costume. I'm having a fitting. They haven't got it quite right yet. She paused. I'm Daisy in the cycling fish. Of course, said Dr. Fassbinder, blushing. I was going to see it the other night, but I seem to have mislaid my tickets. Fergus, darling, trilled Eugenie, sweeping past everyone on the landing and descending on Fergus. How's my little sailor? Why the glum face? I don't want to talk about it, said Fergus quietly. Let Eugenie cheer you up, she continued, throwing her head back and bursting into song. Oh, sweet Alfred, my heart is breaking. She hit the high note in breaking. Prince Caspian gave a squeal of alarm and dropping its catch as it leaped from the Archduke's head onto the marble floor and scrambled through the Bigsby Clutterbuck's open door. Everyone gathered round the little black body lying on the cold floor. It's, trembled Miss Gum. My toupee! Shrieked Arturus Squidgy, dashing down the stairs from the second floor, his silk dressing gown flapping and his bald head gleaming. Fergus left them singing and arguing and laughing and crying. It really had been an exhausting day. He climbed slowly to the fourth floor, took out his key and opened the little front door. Home at last, he sighed, slipping off his backpack. Is that you, Fergus? Mrs. Crane's voice floated out of the sitting room. Good day at school? Fine, Fergus called back, untruthfully. He popped his head round the sitting room door. But I'm tired. I'm going to my room. Mrs. Crane was sitting on a cushion, a box in front of her with a label on its side which read The Fateful Voyage Trading Company, and a form in her hand. She looked up. Before you go, dear, you've got to help me with this, she said. It's my latest job. It arrived this morning. What is it? Said Fergus, giving a big yawn. Your new lunchbox, Fergus, his mother laughed. You were testing it for me, or rather for the Fateful Voyage Trading Company, and all you have to do is answer these simple questions. Fergus sat down on a cushion next to his mother and looked at the form. Dear valued worker, it read, please read the following and answer the questions as honestly as you can. Thank you in anticipation, and with very best wishes, Finn, Bill and Jackson, Vice Presidents, the Fateful Voyage Trading Company. Number 1, read his mother, did the Lunchmatic keep your lunch fresh? I suppose so, yawned Fergus. Number 2, did the Lunchmatic keep your lunch safe and undamaged? Yeah, said Fergus. His mother put another tick in the box provided. Number 3, how much longer? Moaned Fergus. This is the last question, dear, said his mother patiently. Did the Lunchmatic live up to your hopes and expectations? Well, it sprouted 6 legs and ran around when you pressed the button, if that's what you mean, and my friend Horace told me it was well cool, said Fergus, getting up. I'll put a yes, then, said his mother. She looked at Fergus, a look of concern in her eyes. You are looking tired. Maybe you're coming down with something. Perhaps you shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Fergus smiled. That's the second time someone said that to me today, he said, and went to his room, where he flung himself onto his bed and promptly fell asleep. Chapter 11. Fergus awoke with a start. A large, shiny beetle with gleaming eyes was sitting on his chest. He froze in horror. He must be having a nightmare. Strange markings on the insect's side glowed faintly in the dark. The Lunchomatic, he read. The Fateful Voyage Trading Company. Fergus gave a sigh of relief. Get off me, you stupid thing, he said, brushing the lunchbox off. It clattered to the floor, then scuttled to the window and clambered up onto the sill where it perched, its buttons glowing a deep orange. What is it now? Said Fergus irritably, throwing off his quilt and padding over to the window. Outside, the clock in Montmorency Gardens struck 12. Clouds that had been gathering earlier in the evening had cleared once more, and the full moon was shining brightly now, turning everything below it to burnished silver. Fergus looked down. Beside him on the windowsill was the little mechanical box with the injured wing. Fergus gently picked it up and put it in his pocket. All at once, the Lunchomatic began clicking excitedly. And then Fergus saw it. His jaw dropped. It was a huge creature in flight, with great silvery wings, beating silently as it swooped down from the tops of the mountains to his left. At first, Fergus thought it must be some kind of giant albatross or swan, or perhaps a massive albino bat. Yet, as it came closer, he saw that it was not a bird, nor any other living creature. It can't be, Fergus murmured, as he stared unblinking. That's not possible. As if in response, the great metal creature flapped its bolted wings, reared up and trampled at the air with its glinting hoofs. Fergus gasped with amazement. A flying horse, he said, his voice quavering. A mechanical flying horse? You are in great danger, Uncle Theo's note had said. I am sending help. The winged horse swooped down low over Archduke Ferdinand Apartments, and for a moment Fergus lost sight of it. He peered over the sill of the window as far as he dared. Just then, a huge metal face with a long shiny snout and bright ball-bearing eyes loomed up in front of his own. Fergus's heart missed a beat. Have you come for me? he asked. The horse gave no reply, but hovered in front of Fergus's window, its great wings beating in the same curious up and down circular movement as the little mechanical box. "Do you want me to go with you?" he asked. Beside Fergus, the Lunchomatic seemed in no doubt. It clambered to the edge of the sill and jumped onto the horse's back. "Oh, well," said Fergus doubtfully. Goodness knows what his mother would say. "Here goes," he whispered as he inched his way along the windowsill. The chill wind whistled through the shutters beneath him as he carefully manoeuvred himself to the very edge of the sill, his feet dangling into nothingness. The streetlights seemed to telescope away. "Don't look down," he told himself. He reached out with one hand and touched the cold metal of the creature's neck. All at once, the great winged horse lunged forwards, knocking him off the sill with one broad wingtip and catching him on his back. Fergus sat back in the padded saddle, the wind knocked out of him, struggling to catch his breath. "Whoa!" he cried out a moment later. It was all he could manage, as Boulevard Archduke Ferdinand, Montmorency Gardens and the canal swept by in a smudge of muted shadow and light. Pulling himself forward, Fergus was about to seize the reins when he noticed the label attached to them. "Do not touch," it said in big red letters. Instead, Fergus gripped the ornate pommel of the saddle and held on tightly. Once around the harbour they flew, with the horse's huge wings beating effortlessly and the wind tugging at Fergus's clothes and ruffling his hair. Having got over the initial shock, Fergus was beginning to enjoy the flight. "You are incredible," he gasped and patted the horse's shiny metal neck. "Absolutely incredible." With a toss of its head and a beat of its wings, the great mechanical flying horse circled the old lighthouse at Cyclops Point, then soared off high into the sky. Fergus leaned forward and clung on tightly round the horse's neck as the slumbering city fell away beneath him. With his heart thumping and his stomach churning, he didn't know what he felt. Was he excited? Was he scared? As the snowy peaks of the mountains came closer, only one thing was certain. Fergus Crane had just set out on the greatest adventure of his life.